Hello everyone, these are the highlights from the last week on the Israel-Hamas War. We're going to talk about the ongoing IDF invasion of Lebanon and Hezbollah signaling its willingness to go to a ceasefire, the regional tensions as everyone awaits Israel's retaliation against Iran, substantial escalations of fighting in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, as well as clashes and violence between the IDF and Palestinian factions throughout the West Bank. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive deep into the latest on the Israel-Hamas War. On day 372 to the war, the first highlights I'm going to focus on are the Israel-Hezbollah front. Over the past week, there's been a lot of speculation about the fate of Hashem Safiaddin. As a reminder, Safiaddin was signaled by several different elements as a possible successor of Hassan Nasrallah as the leader of Hezbollah, and the IDF carried out a major airstrike in the Dahya region of Beirut on October 3rd in an attempt to assassinate him. On October 5th, several different elements within Israel suggested that the assassination was successful. However, it is important to note that until now there's been no official confirmation from the IDF nor from Hezbollah about the fate of Safiaddin. It has been reported that contact with him has been lost since that attack on October 3rd, which currently leaves Naim Qassem, who was Nasrallah's deputy for the last 32 years, in the de facto leadership position of Hezbollah. Naim Qassem's position as the de facto leader of Hezbollah may be very important when we consider a speech that he gave on October 8th. In that speech, he signaled for the first time since the war began that Hezbollah may be willing to accept a ceasefire that would be disconnected from the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip. Just to clarify what I mean by this, since the war began, Hezbollah has refused any notion of a diplomatic resolution to end the escalation between the group and Israel. Hassan Nasrallah's repeated position was that only when a ceasefire is brokered in the Gaza Strip will he accept a ceasefire in Lebanon. There were several different attempts since the war began to find a diplomatic resolution between Israel and Lebanon that would lead to sort of a cessation of hostilities in northern Israel and southern Lebanon. Hezbollah always said it would not accept any such negotiations. Any ceasefire is only going to be tied to the situation in Gaza. This week, however, in light of the massive escalations in Lebanon and the IDF invasion of the country, Naim Qassem stated very different things, saying that Hezbollah would endorse any ceasefire deal that would be brokered by the Lebanese government, and he did not mention Gaza at all in that speech. It is important to note, we're nowhere near a ceasefire yet. All the diplomatic resolutions to end the escalations that have been proposed since the war began relied on versions of implementing the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 back from 2006, which required Hezbollah to withdraw north of the Litani River, something Hezbollah has never agreed to. Qassem did not mention this in his speech. Instead, he emphasized there would have to be a complete cessation of the fire prior to discussing any terms of the ceasefire, something that Israel is most certainly not going to agree to. Nevertheless, the very fact that Hezbollah has signaled its willingness to accept a ceasefire regardless of one in the Gaza Strip is a major development in the war, likely indicative of the internal pressure the group is facing in light of the IDF attack and invasion of Lebanon. Alongside this, the intensive fighting between the IDF and Hezbollah has continued over the past week. Since the IDF invasion of Lebanon, Hezbollah has substantially increased the amount of rockets and missiles it has been firing each day, in some cases firing over 200 rockets per day. In the last 24 hours, over the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, Hezbollah fired over 320 rockets, missiles, and drones into Israel. In some cases, these included long-range missiles targeting the center of the country. On Friday, 2 suicide drones were also launched from Lebanon towards Herzliya in Israel Center. While one was intercepted, the other managed to hit an old age home in Herzliya. No one was injured as the residents taken refuge in a bomb shelter. Meanwhile, in addition to the ongoing ground invasion, the IDF has significantly intensified its airstrikes throughout southern and central Lebanon as well, carrying out on some days well over 100 bombing raids and airstrikes throughout the entire regions. On Tuesday this past week, significant airstrikes were reported throughout southern Lebanon, reportedly targeting underground headquarters of the Radwan force, that is Hezbollah's main sort of commando units that are tantamount to the Nukhba force of Hamas that carried out October 7th. In addition to this, while the IDF is continuing to expand its ground activity in Lebanon and more evacuation orders have been issued to Lebanese villages throughout southern Lebanon, on Friday Reuters published that Hezbollah has rebuilt its command structure following the initial IDF airstrikes that managed to either injure or assassinate large elements of Hezbollah's command centers, and that the operatives in the field are now being issued new orders in preparation for a prolonged war of attrition with the IDF. What we learned from this is that Hezbollah is already trying to readapt to the new situation, and Hezbollah is trying to look at the new situation as something that will be a prolonged war to drag the IDF into Lebanon, rather than something that will be seen as a quick operation and force Israel to withdraw quickly. Hezbollah probably sees as a tactic for itself right now, drag Israel into the quote-unquote Lebanese mud and make the IDF sink there. That will both help Hamas in the Gaza Strip, because the IDF will be forced to send more troops into Lebanon, while also inflicting severe losses on the IDF, which may put Hezbollah in a better bargaining position than it is right now. Again, that's speculation on my part. All we know is that Hezbollah is reporting that it has rebuilt its command structure and is preparing for a much longer war of attrition. Expanding more to the regional front with regards to the expected Israeli retaliation against Iran, after an internal political schism in Israel, a phone call was arranged between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu on Wednesday. This happened after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he would not authorize the trip of Defense Minister Yoav Gallant to the United States unless Biden speaks to him first. There have been multiple contradictory reports about both the content and the nature of that phone call. Some reports suggesting that the conversation was factual and pleasant, other reports suggesting it was very confrontational. At this point, the reports are roughly 50-50 about how that phone call went. In either event, most of the reports do agree that while the U.S. expressed support for Israel's right to retaliate against Iran for its missile strike against Israel, Biden urged Netanyahu not to strike at Iran's nuclear facilities or at its oil rigs and other oil development capabilities, fearing that this will spiral into a complete regional flare-up. In another moment of analysis, I'll add here that while it was not explicitly reported with regards to this phone call, there have been multiple reports in several different Middle East outlets that a lot of the Gulf countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Bahrain, have all urged the United States not to let Israel strike Iran's nuclear or oil facilities, fearing that the escalation that would ensue may result in their own energy production facilities being targeted in the crossfire. The Asharq al-Awsat newspaper reported on October 21st that Iran has conveyed to Israel messages through European channels saying that despite inflammatory rhetoric, Iran will be willing to turn a blind eye to a limited Israeli retaliation, i.e. signaling they're aware that Israel will retaliate, but if their retaliation is limited, Iran will turn a blind eye and the situation might be able to spiral down. However, those messages also added that any strike against nuclear or oil facilities will lead Iran to, quote, have no choice but to cross red lines. In addition to that, the report also added that Iran has threatened surrounding countries, including Jordan, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, that if their airspace is used for an attack on Iran, then Iran will retaliate against them directly. So again, it is possible those countries are applying pressure on the United States, which in turn is trying to apply pressure on Israel. Those two things were not linked in any of the reports about the phone call between Biden and Netanyahu. However, connecting the dots, that may be what's behind that pressure. Alongside all this, however, it was reported on Saturday that the United States has approved an immediate transfer of THAAD air defense batteries to Israel. These are batteries that are used specifically for intercepting ballistic missiles, and their transfer is part of the preparation for potential future escalations. And on another topic related to Iran, over the past 9 days there's been a lot of question marks raised about the whereabouts of Ismail Qaani. He's the commander of the entire Quds force in the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. He replaced Qasem Soleimani after his assassination back in 2020. Qaani disappeared on October 3rd, and reports began to surface that he may have been in the bunker with Hashem Safi ad-Din when it was attacked by the IDF. For days, his fate was seemingly unknown, with a lot of speculation being floated throughout the entire Middle East, until on October 10th it was reported in Iran that Qaani's whereabouts are known. Later that day, Reuters quoted Iranian officials stating that Qaani himself has been interrogated by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards as part of suspicion that the Israeli Mossad has infiltrated the organization, and that there were specific suspicions that Qaani's chief of staff may be involved in this infiltration. According to the reports in Sky News in Arabic and other sites, Qaani suffered a heart attack during his interrogation and was being treated in a hospital. However, he was, quote, doing well. These reports were later denied by Iran. What we can surmise from these reports is that likely Qaani was not in the bunker with Hashem Safiaddin, who was likely not targeted in that assassination. However, it is possible that he has been injured. It is possible that he was under interrogation and had a heart attack. We don't exactly know his whereabouts. If Ismail Qaani is in fact no longer going to be in the position to preside over the Quds Force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, that's going to be a major development in the way Iran manages the connections to the different militias in the region. More on this as it develops. In addition to these regional escalations, the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip is continuing and has seen its own rounds of escalations in the past week. Despite the IDF moving some of its forces out of the Gaza Strip and diverting them to Lebanon, the operation that the military has launched in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip has significantly expanded. New evacuation orders have been issued to Palestinians throughout Jabalia refugee camp and other areas in Gaza City, as fighting has intensified throughout that entire region. The IDF has reported intensive airstrikes and gun battles against Hamas presence that has been rebuilt in the region over the past months, including targeting an assembly area of top-ranking Hamas members within Jabalia refugee camp in the last several days. The Al-Qassam brigades have also reported intensive clashes on the ground with the IDF, and Hamas has also seemingly intensified its firing of rockets from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip into Israel in response to the IDF raids, possibly as a show of force, showing that Hamas is still capable of firing rockets from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, even while the IDF is carrying out operations in that area. In addition to this, intensive battles have also been reported in the last several days in Al Bureij refugee camp, with the Israeli military reporting that it carried out raids against the Hamas headquarters inside a school. And both the IDF and the Al-Qassam brigades also reported ongoing fighting in Rafah as well. All this is at a much lower intensity than we've seen fighting in the Gaza Strip over the past year. However, compared to the situation a month ago, this is an increase in the level of fighting in the Gaza Strip, possibly signaling that both the IDF is starting to readjust to the fighting that is going on in Lebanon and managing to split its forces, possibly also indicative of the fact that Hamas is sensing that with the IDF dwindling its forces in the Gaza Strip, it's time for Hamas to try to retake some of the territory. We'll see how these things develop in the coming days. In addition to these highlights, while I'm not going to go into this in great detail, it is important to note that there are continuous escalations going on throughout the West Bank, and the past week specifically has been one of the more intensive weeks that have been in the West Bank. Particularly intensive confrontations were reported in the areas of Nablus, and among others, an IDF airstrike assassinated the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade commander in the Balata refugee camp. In addition to this, the IDF reported that the Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander of the Nur Shams refugee camp was assassinated on October 11th, and this comes alongside daily IDF raids and continuous clashes between Palestinians and Israeli settlers. Like I said, I'm not going to go into this in great detail. There's escalations going on in the West Bank every day. I'm just mentioning it here since the West Bank is often an overlooked arena in the war. However, it is also one of those arenas that has a potential for continuous flare-ups at any moment, and thus, when we have a particularly intensive week, I'm mentioning it as something else to remember as part of understanding the entire makeup of the way this war is going. Those are my highlights from the past week. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out, send them to anyone who you think may be interested in the war. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.